The Independent Communications Authority of South Africa has warned that operators who fail to comply with the new data bundle rules will face penalties. This follows amendments to regulations governing data expiry. The updated rules require mobile operators to offer mandatory free data rollover and data transfer services. This means the unused data bundles must be rolled over at least once to the following month at no additional cost, provided the SIM card remains active. The mobile regulator says it will actively monitor mobile network operators to ensure compliance. EFF MP and Youth Command National Coordinator Naledi Chirwa-Mpungose joins us for more. Naledi, a very good evening to you and thank you so much for coming through.
Good evening to yourself and everybody watching us at home. Thank you so much for having us tonight.
It's an absolute pleasure. So the EFF has long complained against these exploitative data practices. How significant do you think the regulatory change is, especially with regards to bridging the digital divide?
Look, it's been a long fight. As you say, we've been at it for many years, championing the fact that data must fall, right? And this is definitely a step in the right direction. It's step one, actually, because many things still need to happen. But as the EFF, we welcome this particular development because it also affirms our consistency in championing this particular thing politically and through our legislative efforts that we've consistently put forth to say data must fall. It's an issue of access, an issue of fundamental human rights that are enshrined in our Constitution. So we definitely welcome this development.
Yeah, and you speak about it's an issue of access, and I think really this victory must mean a lot, not only for young people, but those of low-income communities.
Oh, absolutely. I think when you go to the ground, that's when you start seeing the gravitas of this particular conversation. You know, it's tied to various different things that are involved in economic opportunities and accessing economic opportunities. I mean, a simple thing as doing an application for university requires that you have access to the internet. A simple thing of applying for a job requires that you have access to the internet. If you are starting your own business as a young creative, you require access to the internet. Even Nomjolo Siswam will require access to the internet, right?
Does.
So it's tied to different facets of our lives. And I think with the poor and the vulnerable that are left behind, Indaba data closes them off even much more because then they don't have access to certain opportunities, to certain information, even in case of civil society participating in what government is doing, right? Indaba is simple, IDP engagements, things like tenders being taken out, things like engagements that are happening. For example, now we're talking about this Icasa thing, and the EFF was not necessarily invited to be on news platforms. Now people needed access to be able to know what is the EFF doing, what are these things that are developments that are happening. And so it's definitely a step in the right direction because it's tied to the livelihoods of our people. It's tied to our quest to seek out economic opportunities and economic freedom. That's why it is a step in the right direction because many things still need to roll over. Many things, not just the data must roll over, but many things still need to happen. Because it must take 12 months. We think that particular period is too long, right? I mean, this can be done in much more shorter periods. And we know that Icasa is giving room because we know there will be pushback. Because people are losing money. These big establishments, these big networks are losing money. So we are expecting a pushback from them and pursue different systems, legal systems, in order to push back on this particular victory. But as the EFF, we are ready for them and willing to champion the struggle even further.
Talking about that pushback, just talk to us maybe about the challenges within this process that you encountered as the EFF and just what you needed to navigate for you to get to this point.
I mean, just earlier today, there's somebody who reached out to me to say a certain network, free advertising.
Please don't.
A certain network reached out to them and said, data is unused. Price data is unused. So already they are making inroads of making sure that their profits are not touched, right? And that needs all of us to be all eyes and all hands on deck because then we must see these things and report them and ensure that Icasa has the capacity to be able to monitor and to regulate how they go about this thing. That's a very important thing. If Icasa does not have enough capacity, then we are reaching a brick wall. And we don't wish to do that. And then, this once-over, roll-over thing, right? We don't want it to be just a once-off rollover. We want it to be eternal. You can't say data sell pelili because and you've granted it to me. And I must be able to use it as and when I please. If you look at other African countries, you'll see that South Africa actually is one of the countries where data is the most expensive. right? So even this whole gap must still be addressed, because if you go to other countries like Ghana and Nigeria, you'll find that in contrast to South Africa, the ratio is much higher in terms of the data and what we are charged. And that's blatant exploitation. And we still need to confront them to address this particular thing. Many things still need to happen, because we are fighting a constitutional and a fundamental right of our people, access to information, you know, something that we take for granted. If you live in a metropolitan city or in a metropolitan area, abantu abahlala emakhaya don't even have electricity. They don't even have network. When you get to the issue of data, it's a whole new ball game that we still need to get inside of. Even with this company, we're facing this particular issue, right? Where you find that parents in Gauteng, for example, because they've got a system where you need to apply online for the child. But why do they come to us and say, I didn't apply because I didn't have data? This is something that you and I or somebody else at home may overlook, to say, why didn't you apply on time? But people don't have the means to be able to access the things that they're entitled to. Because this is a right that our people are entitled to. It's enshrined in the Constitution, and government must work hard to ensure that human rights are able to reach them at their point of need.
And you keep emphasizing that the next step that needs to be taken is certainly one that needs to address the high costs of data in order to improve digital inclusion. What do you think is the social compact of these telecommunication companies, especially when it comes to what they need to give back and just they're operating in a country where they're able to make such profits, but also create such ways that people aren't able to have the access that they need to have?
I mean, that's the downside of capitalism. The focus remains just profiteering and profit-making. That's why data must roll over. Already there's a certain network that's starting to make inroads on increasing the price of data, right? So their focus is purely based on profiteering. And they do have social obligations that they must be able to fulfill in our societies. They make money off of the backs of our systems. They make money even through government channels, right? If you go through public grab cell phones, we use these cell phone networks. So even taxpayers participate in this whole process, whether knowingly or unknowingly, directly or indirectly. So these networks must be able to carry their social obligations and even go a step forward, because South Africa is a peculiar country, right? Where the gap between the rich and the poor is so big. I mean, we are living in a country where 50%, over 50% of our population still go to bed without food. That's the situation we find ourselves in. It's as much as that, where people have to decide, am I buying bread or am I buying 1 gig of data? And if you are choosing to buy data, the following morning you wake up and that data is gone. That's the price that young people in this country have to pay? Absolutely not, and we're definitely going to fight it. And we hope that these private networks are able to find their conscience within themselves before we force them to, in the same way we have done through this process. We hope they're able to find their conscience within themselves, to know that they are functioning in a country that still requires all of us to give what we have and ensure that people have access to information and economic opportunities.
Why do you think it's taken so long?
It's taken so long because people want money. People are profiteering, and because this whole system or industry is operated by a very select few, so the competition isn't that vast. That's why, as the EFF were even saying, that Icasa must make sure that in their spectrum, they must make sure that they're able to auction, they must not auction just isolating even the ones who want to come into the industry. Auctioneering, it must be in such a way that it's facilitated to be able to empower those who want to enter the industry as well. Even at the portfolio committee, we're moving for that move to say Icasa must still come back and explain to the committee, Uguti, what do these regulations particularly mean for ordinary people who are sitting at home, right? Because there are people already celebrating, thinking that but we're looking at a 12-month stipulation, right? So those are things that still need to be addressed, that we'll still be pushing forth in our committees. We are writing to the committee speakers and chairpersons to say, Icasa kuzomele ibuye, and we address these particular things, because this is the start of the process. The road is still long.
It certainly is. And we know that government has a role to create a conducive environment for organizations such as the telecoms companies to be able to operate within the country. But what responsibility does government have, especially when it comes to access for people that are living in the rural areas, where for them it's not even just about that rollover, but the access in its initial stage? Yeah,
that is why we're living in a country where even something as access to electricity is still a problem in some communities. Access to network, for instance, I had a case today where a student said they got accepted, but they didn't know that they were accepted in the university because ubesemakaya, and they couldn't accept that that admission from the university, and then they ended up losing the space in the institution. That's how dire these, and that's the price, that the repercussions that our people pay on the ground. So we get really angry when people like Gwete Mantashe come on national TV and say that our people, or young people specifically, don't have jobs because they are lazy. It speaks to the fact that government does not have the eye, the GNU does not have the eye to be able to speak on the people that they claim to represent. They speak the language of revolution, they speak the issues of our people, but do not have the conscience and the heart to know the real struggles, because they don't even go to those places. They don't even visit to those places unless kuna elections. And we interact with them on a daily basis through various campaigns of the economic freedom fighters, and we know the struggles they face on a daily basis. So government has to do much more. And luckily for them, they've got a good opposition party that will push them in the right direction. And I think this was very affirming for the EFF to know that with our 9%, we were able to push for this particular milestone.
While I have you here, Naledi, we saw that pre-sentencing hearing of your commander-in-chief. What's the EFF's youth command on what the sentencing could possibly mean for the future?
Yeah, you know, we are very clear on what this process is for us as the Economic Freedom Fighters Youth Command. We know that our commander-in-chief is targeted because he's leading the charge of our generational mission of economic freedom in our lifetime. I mean, we all saw it was a public spectacle when Donald Trump was engaging the president and the real president of South Africa, Rupert John Steenhuisen, and the whole cabal. And wakipa inamba Donald Trump ebuza ukuthi kutheni le ndoda ingaboshwanga, right? And not soon after that, then the process then exacerbated, because remember, it took years. But right after that interaction, then the guilty verdict was given. It's not the first. We know this modus operandi. I mean, in America, it's been the modus operandi for many years, for decades, in fact. You know, with Eugene Debs, who was the first socialist candidate to contest president in the United States, he was imprisoned because he was fighting against World War I. Even in the South African context, we've got this particular. We know Nelson Mandela in the Rivonia trial. We know how the system, the legal system, is abused to target people who represent an idea. So what they want to arrest is not the commander-in-chief, Julius Sello Malema. They want to arrest the idea that he is leading. They want to arrest the idea of economic freedom in our lifetime. And as young people, we rally each and every young person in the country to know that it's not that just the commander-in-chief that is being sentenced. It's not just the commander-in-chief that got the verdict of guilty. It's all of us who are saying the status quo must change. It is all of us who are saying land must come back to us. It is all of us who are saying we want our mineral resources to come back into our hands. So this particular charge requires all of us to be all hands on deck. That's why City, hands off the commander-in-chief.